Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Nir Segev. I'm from Acting Studio Nissan Nativ, Jerusalem Acting Studio Nissan Nativ. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us tonight at the Triangles. We have a very special and unique and interesting session with the great writer and director Neil Lביוט. And thank you, Neil, for joining us. And he will speak with Shuki Ben-Naim, and our own Jerusalem writer, Shuki. Thank you for joining us as well. And I want to say a few things before we start about Triangles. Triangles is it's a series of Zoom sessions with artists from all around the world that we started at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. There isn't many good things that you can say about this pandemic, but it did make us rethink our old patterns in creation and in art teachings as well. And one of them is to try and draw inspiration and to look beyond the borders of Israel at other people and other artists to see how they deal with it. And what do they do, and you know how they deal with that, and in general. And this is what we try today. So again, I want to thank Neil to join us, and hope we can, draw a bit inspiration from his a very large body of work that he did. And Shuki, I think with that, we'll go to you.
Okay, great. Hi, Neil. Great seeing you again.
Yeah, you as well.
So a quick introduction of Neil Lביוט for those who need it. Neil is an accomplished, critically acclaimed, award-winning playwright, screenwriter, and a director. He is a prolific writer who wrote for theater, television, and cinema. We are here to talk about his work, and as Nathan mentioned earlier, we're also trying to look at it from a perspective of a pandemic and what it made, how it affected human relationships. This relationship, for example, Zoom, who knew it would be that important a few years ago, enables us to reach out to writers across the globe and see the resemblances in the things they have to deal with as writers, with a pandemic or without. As you will see, I hope, throughout the conversation, there are many parallels between the people who are here in Jerusalem, and writers in Jerusalem, and the things Neil Lביוט addresses and deals with in his writing. And I hope we would be able to talk about it, the connection between religion, for example, and writing, religion and drama. And that's it, basically. Neil, I'll just mention some of Neil's key works. Some of them were also translated into Hebrew and were shown successfully in theaters in Israel. For example, Fat Pig was translated into Hebrew as Shmena by Asaf Tzipor. Neil's famous works for theater are also In the Company of Men. For television, Neil created the show Van Helsing, currently streaming on Netflix. And Nurse Betty is one of his most famous works for cinema, which also awarded him the best screenplay at Cannes, right? So Neil, as I said, you're a prolific writer. You write for television, you write for movies, you write for drama. And I saw in the brochure that you were introduced as an award-winning Hollywood screenwriter. Is that accurate?
Is that accurate? I mean, I guess, yeah, there must be some reason that's there. What is it? I got in the New York Film Critics Award for my first film, Sundance Award. Independent Spirit Awards for, it's just different things. Yeah. So I guess view that as an accurate, by the book description. I've won an award or two. I guess we're done.
Okay. I mean, yeah, the award-winning part, we're done. But you're not in Hollywood, right?
How simple.
The awards, yeah, we got that covered. But you're not in Hollywood. You're in upstate New York, I believe, currently.
I am. Yeah, upstate New York.
And from other interviews you've given over the years, it seems obvious that you see yourself more of a playwright than a screenwriter. I mean, that's your main passion, and that's the medium where you feel most comfortable in, right?
Well, yes, I think that's where I started. And so therefore I feel, that's kind of the place that I always jump off from. More comfortable. Yeah, probably so. I mean, on a strictly kind of creative basis, and I can say this having just come out of working on a film in the last couple of weeks, it hasn't changed, the process in the last 25, 30 years for me. It's always kind of controlled chaos. Everything's built around an economic model. And that's from a very small film to a much larger film, which I've worked on a variety of those things in terms of budget and all of that. It's all based on, what's the cheapest and fastest way we can make that movie. And then everyone else is accounted for in that mix. You take your actors and you tell them we're going to shoot this and this and this because that's the day that we can get this location, or that's the cheapest time that we can get on an airplane, or, so it's not built for the way in which they should build a character, the way that they should try and take the journey emotionally. We often, have them meet on the very first day without very much or very little rehearsal at all, and throw them in, and the success rate has to be, or hopes to be, 100%. For every day of production. It's not like you're going to grow, like in rehearsal you grow, and by the second week or the third week in a theater, you're like, oh, and we're all starting to click together now. Everyone's now got their lines, and we're working toward this product. The product is from day one of production in a film. You want the first day to look as good as the last day. Which I understand, but it's not as creative and fulfilling a way to work, I think, as that, we're all in the same place in the beginning of the play, and we all essentially get to the same place in the end. Everyone's going to have a slightly different experience, obviously, and it's going to be different every night, but that's part of that ephemeral beauty of doing a play. It's not the same as,
right.
It's just everything about, I really like actors. I respect what they do. I don't do it. So therefore, it's still kind of magical to me to watch them do it. And I try and create as good a bubble for them to work in. And I don't like seeing them rushed on to they often feel like the, not inessential part, but the part that we can rush, in the filmmaking process. We let someone set their lights for, an hour, and then it's time for the actors to go. And so everybody's like, let's go. This is and I think it can happen. They can just flick a switch on. And so that's I don't love that part of the process. So as much as I can make it not like theater, but make it like a place where you really feel like you can do your best work, that's where I'm happiest. So, and that seems to be more often than not in the theater.
Great. I mean, it's really interesting, especially in the context of COVID, because, for me, in the beginning, COVID was kind of like a blessing. I didn't have to leave my pajama. Nobody was bothering me. I didn't have to go anywhere. All I had to do was write. Of course, I didn't write anything, but
there you go. All right, that's good.
So I can understand why COVID might work for writers, but how does it affect the set? How does it affect directors' work and actors' work?
I haven't done, well, that's not true. I did a play, a really interesting session doing a play about a year ago, I guess, calendar year. So we were about 6 months or 7 months into COVID. and I was going to have a play opening in upstate New York, across the river from where I live, at this new black box theater, and I'd given them a play to do, and it shut down during rehearsals. But I knew those people, and we were like, how can we keep things going? What's the spirit of how can we do some theater? So I wrote a play for two people. We said, let's do something out of doors, and people were starting to get some sanctioned performances for that kind of thing. So I wrote a show for two people to be done out of doors for an audience, and then our union. I don't know if you have the equivalent in Israel of equity, but we have this union that the actors are a part of, and they wouldn't sanction the performances outdoors for their membership. So the actors could not perform. So our choice was to get non-equity actors, which exist, or not do it. So we thought, gosh, what can we do with that other than hate equity? So we did that. We hated equity, thinking there's only so we're talking about there's only 4 actors working now in New York, and you don't want 2 of them to work. So that's great. So what do? What we did is we let 8 people into the theater a night. So the audience was because it was square. So 8 people per show, and the actors recorded the performance vocally, and the audience. So it was basically like listening to an audiobook, but coming into the theater and looking across the auditorium at other people. And there was a set with some stuff happening, and lighting that kind of took you on this journey. But essentially, you were listening to this performance, and that was completely because of COVID and the situation that we had tried to work with COVID and equity. And COVID turned out to be friendlier than equity, and so we then did the play that way. But then film-wise, I've done 2 films now in this period where I've had to deal with the tests 3 times a week, and everybody's temperature checked every day, and keeping people in kind of a bubble. And the first time it was a cast of 4 all in one location, so that was very manageable. The thing I just came off of was much more like other films that you'd see where there were a number of locations and a lot more actors, and it was the same essential layout, but we did run into, here's a person who isn't vaccinated, and we were supposed to be a fully vaccinated show, so that person had to be removed. They hadn't told us they weren't vaccinated. We had one person out of however big the crew and cast was have a double positive test, and so they had to be removed. But essentially, we were able to work and get the film finished. So work is being done, but it makes it harder, And theater, I think, is a tough proposition for a lot of people. The idea of crowding into a theater, especially New York theaters that are, again, built on the economics of how many people can we get into these, 1,000-seat theaters, and it used to be annoying when someone would cough, and now it's scary when someone coughs. So it's the question is, how badly do you want to see Wicked or Hamilton? Do you want to watch it on television, or do you want to go in there and pay $150 to run the risk of COVID? So all those things, I guess, will be answered along the way. We'll see how long things stay the way they are now, but I have gotten a taste of all those things, and of going back to the movies and all that stuff. So I've managed to continue my creative life and interests, but there's definitely been a change.
Fascinating. I mean, the thing I was thinking about, well, you explained the differences about working in theater under COVID restraints and movie sets under COVID restraints, is the way that the medium actually might change if we change the venue. Shakespeare's Globe, for example, relied heavily on the voice of the actors. So do you see something like that? If for example, theaters are going to go outside, is it going to change the style of writing? Is it going to change your style of writing?
It may be too soon to tell. I think yes is probably the general answer for some things, and other things will be doggedly similar. There's not there's not a lot of directions that Broadway can go, for instance.
Right.
They can't
Because it's
find
Broadway, yeah.
an outdoor auditorium that will take care of their audience on a year-round basis because of weather and because of all kinds of things. So that isn't practical. But for a smaller theater company who says, "Hey, can we actually do an entire season of plays online or that kind of thing?" I'm sure they can. I've seen a number of plays on Zoom now, and I have disliked the experience for the most part. Most of them have been, now to be fair, that we should have an asterisk on it, because most of them have been readings.
Right.
A reading is not the same as a play, or doing a production. When you have actors who have learned the parts and are, even then, of course, they're not having physical contact. There's been a couple of examples that have done it well. Like there's a guy named Richard Nelson, American director, who has taken he wrote these this Rhinebeck, what is it called? He calls it something, not a trilogy or a panorama, maybe he calls it, because he's written like 12 plays about these 3 different families up near where I live. About 40 minutes from here is where I think he lives. And he's written about this area through these families. But he went to Zoom and embraced the technology and said, we're doing a play with these families having a Zoom call. And
right.
So they're coming on, they're talking to the camera, they've learned their parts. So they're not looking at a text, they're like talking to each other as we're talking to each other. And that was the most effective version of this I had seen. And 2 of the actors, in fact, are married. And so they were in the same room. And, so you really got the sense of different members of this family calling in on a Zoom call. And but it was all fictional and written by him, and they had learned it and done several plays with him. He did a version of Uncle Vanya with this, with this core kind of group of actors. So they were well versed in how he works, and right. And really, I think they've done 3 or 4 of these plays now. So I think he kind of cornered the market on the best use of Zoom. That said, it's still people talking to each other across, the digital airwaves, and not really being able to even like connect with the other person. I can see you here, but I'm trying to look in the camera as well, so it doesn't look like I'm always looking up at the stars or whatever it is. It's a strange way to do. I did a reading with a company of a version of Uncle Vanya that I had done, and some really good actors involved. But it all depends on how well they read in the end. And it's still people with different backgrounds that you're staring at, all just reading this play. So it's something, certainly something. It's a beautiful play to listen to. So I can take all those things, but it doesn't replace the experience of sitting in a room and enjoying that communal sense of being there together and doing a play. It just doesn't do it. And I think people will find creative ways to use it, and it's a great way for people. The good news is, I think for young artists or anyone really, but it's kind of leveled the playing field for a while of like where people can find an audience, and so it's never been a better time to go create something that would work on this medium and do it, and get it out there. And there's no better experience than doing something. So all that is positive, but you could always do that. And I think for the last however many years, people are willing to watch YouTube and movies on their phone and that kind of thing. So it's a good time creatively for people to say, I can do work and get it out there if I want to. It's like having a treadmill at home. No longer right. You look out the window and go, oh shit, it's raining, I really can't go exercise. The thing is waiting for you downstairs, and it's never raining down there. So just get off your ass and go work. So now I think with the advent of this kind of thing, people are faced a lot more with, do they really want to work or not? And I like that. I like, I've always been one in college. If I couldn't get in a proper theater, I would go make a theater, somewhere on campus and find a play that fit that space, and now I write shit to fit a space. So I haven't changed that much in however long, way too long, but however long.
So you mentioned college. I want to talk a little bit about your college experience, because in a lot of ways it's unique. It's definitely not the Animal House college experience people are usually depict or think about.
Did anyone have that college experience? I don't know. I don't think anybody.
I don't know.
No one ever actually had that.
I went to a yeshiva, so I really don't know.
No, you probably didn't have it. No.
Yeah. So you went to Brigham Young.
Yeah.
It's a Mormon school in Provo, near in Utah. So you're 18. You get a scholarship for Brigham Young, which is a Mormon university. You were aware that you won't be able to drink, curse, and have sex for 4 years, which kind of makes the whole college experience redundant, no? And so why did you choose Brigham Young? And how did it affect your writing? Because at some point, you converted to Mormonism.
Yeah,
you weren't born Mormon, but you converted to Mormonism.
That's right.
So how did that affect your writing? And we'll talk about the ramifications of that decision later on in your life.
Okay. Well, good and bad, like most things tend to. There's positives and negatives. Positively, I was looking for some place far away from where I grew up. From the situation I was born into. So that looked good. It was several states away from where I grew up, and it was a group of people who I knew somewhat from school, from high school. There were a lot of Mormons. Mormons often gravitate to the arts, and they have it's a very performative religion in terms of its services. Like you have people sing and play instruments, and they're always doing
I always think there's
a
close relationship between believing and make believe.
Exactly. And so there was right from the very foundation, in fact, of that church, most people would say, it all sounds as hard as it is to believe, a lot of, that's part of the idea of faith, I guess. You hear something that sounds hard to believe, and you either believe it or you don't believe it. So, in that sense, that religion wasn't any harder to believe than stories from the Old Testament or from Buddhism or anything. It was you either embrace it or you don't. So on that level, I didn't have as big a problem ultimately as I did with the religion going. This just doesn't seem to work for me, and certainly not for me working as a writer. But at the time, it was a place where they seemed to want me. They were offering me money to come to school, and the students that I already knew, I liked, and the people going there, I generally thought, hey, here's a pretty good group of people. I liked the facilities they had. So all those things, just the things that surround you at school seemed good to me. And so there I went and went off and started to study, and had to study, the Mormon religion and all that, but studying everything else and like. I shouldn't say like everybody else. I don't know. I had a pretty unique experience, as you mentioned, but I really sort of just concentrated when I was free of being home and out of high school. And, I really wanted to concentrate on theater and English lit and that sort of thing. And all my other studies suffered. I would sign up for a class and then not show up and then not drop the class. And, doing stupid, adolescent shit like that. So, I was literally like, when I was getting ready to graduate college, I still had a freshman math class that I had to finish, before I could graduate. And so the last few weeks, I'm still trying to figure out math. And I've hated math since whenever it turned to algebra. So that was like from probably 7th grade for us. In the US, in my schooling, like in 7th grade when there was algebra, I was like, what the fuck is this? This doesn't make any, wait, you taught me numbers and now there's letters. Why, what's happening? And I didn't like it, I didn't embrace it. So I fought math all the way through, and I thought, I'm never gonna use this. No, I would complain and no one cared. And, you just finally kind of get your way through. But then in the end, I was proved correct. I haven't used any of that shit. So I'm the winner at the end of the day. But, I still had to suffer through all that stuff. But being at BYU, yeah, I'm seeing there's people doing theater, and I'm getting to see, certain plays, but I'm realizing when I go to the library, they're really pretty narrow in terms of what they offer for me to look at, to read. And it's been that way when I grew up, in a smaller town in Washington State. So when I went to grad school, that's when my mind was kind of finally blown in terms of going into a library and finding all these playwrights that I'd never heard of before or read, or been taught. And that expanded the writing for me. But even being at BYU, there was the opportunity to write. I only got a little bit in high school chances to write things, and I would just do some on my own. But then in college, that there were actually places in classes that embraced that. So as it seems to have always been for me, I did a lot of the work on my own. It was going outside of what the assignment was and doing more of that, or putting on a play outside, or whatever it was. I've always kind of looked for that extra experience that I could create on my own, and still kind of feel that way today. I'm still hustling to find jobs. My agents find this many and I find this many, because I get out there and work, and I have things that I want to do that, they might not look at as money makers, but I'm like, yeah, but I really want to do this. And so I got to find somebody else who wants to give me some of their money to make that thing. So life hasn't changed that much since I went to BYU. It's just been a different group of people that I've ended up working with.
Yeah, I mean, in Hollywood, it's all about Scientology, so
yeah, that's a group I haven't actually embraced too closely yet.
So I want to talk about a little bit about your Hollywood experience, both for television and movies, because those lines are getting blurred
very much so
nowadays.
Sure.
I was, for example, really surprised to see among your credits Van Helsing, the show, because it's not like, if somebody's familiar with your work or getting familiar with your work and he sees Van Helsing, it's like, that's not a Neil LaBute piece. So what does it do there? So how did you come to write? It's based on a graphic novel, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, that's generous. Yeah, it's basically, there is a graphic novel called Van Helsing that has a woman at the heart of it, but it doesn't really follow the story of that in any way. We embraced the creators of that because I think ultimately they didn't want to have any kind of lawsuit that might come from the idea of having a female Van Helsing. So they incorporated that. They got a credit, but it really wasn't based on that graphic novel. But I came to that, I mean, you'll always find that there's some little thin, albeit gossamer thread sometimes, but you can kind of follow the line of how things happen. The first TV job I did as a director was for a Western called Hell on Wheels that came out of AMC. And I did it because I was, and always have been, a fan of Westerns. And I thought, wow, there aren't very many being done these days. So I'd love to be a part of that. And I'd watched as a fan for a couple of years, and then an opportunity to direct came up. So I met some people in Canada where the show was being shot, and I went in for one episode, and I ended up directing like 5 different episodes in several different seasons. And along the way, the 2 of the producers said to me, "Are you interested in vampires at all?" And explained this idea that had come to their attention about a female vampire hunter. And I had adapted Dracula for the stage a few years before that, and so always had been interested in that world and that novel, and so I thought, yeah, what I'm interested in is that in a certain way. I'm also interested in running a television show. I'd done a couple of things on my own but in a smaller way. And I had not done a writer's room. I had not worked with a network, that really was on top of you and giving notes and all that kind of thing. So the other times that I had done anything for television, I'd done a couple of things for DirecTV, and they had really kind of like heard the idea, given me the money, and said, bring us a show back. And that's what I did. And that was the perfect experience. What that experience, the DirecTV, the idea of like, we trust you, do your thing, bring it back to us, and we'll put it on the air. So that was great. But most of Van Helsing was fun to learn this whole thing, do a lot of special effects and CGI, stuff I'd never done before. Sitting in a writer's room, if you're looking at it from that point of view, for me was very different and sometimes a blast. I liked all the writers that I worked with, but I felt a lot of times like I was a therapist or a babysitter. I spent a lot of times making people feel good about their ideas or why we're not going to use your ideas or and precious time was being wasted. I would often kind of grumble to myself, I could have written half the script in the time that we just talked about why we're not writing it this way and doing it this way instead. So I'm not much of a for that kind of thing. It's nothing wrong with being diplomatic and everybody getting a chance to talk and all that sort of thing, but I, having been someone who's never really had a writing partner or worked that way, it was a very different experience for me. So I had a lot of learning to do in that sense.
I guess
what I should say is it's weird to do that, like have your first experience be that, and yet you're supposed to be running the room, so that makes it a little tricky. Yeah.
It's easier when you pretend you're not running the room.
Exactly. I pretended that a few times actually, when I would just say, whatever, we'll figure it out. But it was and I was away from home a lot. So I was in Vancouver shooting it. So again, good and bad, lots of good things, lots of things that I would change if I was going to go back and do it again.
Yeah, in a earlier preliminary conversation we had, you said you liked writing alone. Writing alone is actually a good experience for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would almost always prefer it. Yeah. I just feel like I get more done if I can just get down to it on my own and get the thing going. It always helps to have another set of eyes, look at things, but it's in terms of the sweaty work of sitting down and piling up pages, I'm better off just being on my own.
So you would say, like, in an ideal world, if there wasn't so much money and interest and opinions involved in movies and television, you would definitely try to write television alone or write movies alone?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
I would do that, or work for the theater, or something, but yes, that first initial creative, here's a script that we're going to work on, I would love to do that on my own. Yeah. I don't think I gained, even in the writer's room, I never wrote anything. We would talk, we would break the story and all of that, but in the end, we would go off and write our own scripts. So I still wrote all those on my own. So it wasn't very different in that sense. It was the kind of how we're telling the story in long form and listening to other people and talking it through, and all that time was what was spent with other people.
Okay. So I wanted to share with you some of the questions people from the audience are asking. So I'll start with Leo's question. Who's your influences, playwriting-wise?
Oh gosh, so many. I mean, I love writers. I love to read. I mean, I started out as a reader, before I was a writer, and I'm still a reader. And so I love reading good stuff. I like Carol Churchill. I like Beckett. I like Pinter. I like Annie Baker. I like Afra Ben. I like God. Who else do I like? I mean, I like Wallace Shawn. Wallace Shawn's one of our best American playwrights, I think. I used to love reading Sam Shepard, always such interesting stuff. Who else? Who wrote Dutchman? Leroy Jones. And I love really well-made plays. I love Lorraine Hansberry's play, Raisin in the Sun. I love Arthur Miller. I love, a play like The Price. And I tend to like a play like All My Sons more than I like Death of a Salesman. I love the language in a lot of Tennessee Williams, but I don't necessarily buy everything that's happening in those plays. But I think the language is beautiful. The Glass Menagerie, I think, is a fantastic play. So yeah, there's I could go on and on. There's a lot of people I love.
Okay, so just name one from the classics. If you have to go back to the history of theater, like
I already said it, Euripides.
We mentioned it. Neil wrote a monodrama called Iphigenia et Aurum that is really clever, interesting, and shocking interpretation of Iphigenia et Aulis by Euripides. I think you fleshed out the comic elements in Euripides in a sense, but it also managed to be a devastating tragedy. So I really recommend it. It's a part of the BASH Latter-day Plays. So I have a question from Racheli, who asks, she would love for you to talk about the craft of writing. How do you start writing?
Who is that? Is this someone I'm staring at or no?
What?
Yeah, so is it someone I'm staring at or no?
I don't know, actually. I can't see Racheli. I'm just reading the question.
There we go. I see a hand. I see a hand. Good. Okay. Hello there.
Hi.
Hi. So tell me that you'd like me to know about what?
About the writing itself.
Yeah.
About the conflicts, the influences you just said, but how is it you sit with yourself? Is it
just somewhat the process?
Yeah.
How do you deal with the writer's block?
I try not to let it happen. I often work on more than one thing at once. I think that's useful to have a couple of things going. Some people don't like that. What I would say in print on a T-shirt or a coffee mug, would be whatever works. Whatever works for you is what works. It doesn't matter if it works for me. Just like actors, I've watched actors walk around the room and stand on their head and bark like a dog and do exercises, and then somebody else just rolls in and is ready to go. I don't care if one process is yours or theirs, as long as you get to that place that I know you can get to. And so as a writer, who cares? For me, it's usually sometimes I sit and stare at a piece of paper or at the screen, and that's probably the slowest going. It's good to come in with something and just start slashing away at an idea, even the little tiniest thing you have. Like I'm just going to write two people in a room. I'm just going to write that on the page. And okay, who are those two people? And and try and figure it out. They're little mysteries. These things, everything we write is a mystery. And then it becomes whatever else it is. But it's we're the first detective trying to figure out what the hell it is that we're seeing in front of us. And we piece it together, and then we hand it to somebody else, and they look at it and say, I don't know, that those clues don't make as much sense to me as they do to you. So I just roll up my sleeves and get down to it. I don't have a special outfit that I wear or a special time of day that I have to do it. I know people who do that, and God bless them for, if that works for them, great. It hasn't been the way that it's worked for me. What has worked is sitting down and, pounding it out. Is writing something, and I know people who don't they're like, oh, I hate to rewrite. What do you do about that? And I'm like, I rewrite. I mean, what else do you do? It's like, that's part of it. That's part of the process. If you like writing, you should like the process, or at least embrace the process. You may find it hard work. It should be hard work. I've done hard work. I grew up on a farm. That was hard work. You know what I mean? That's like, I know what digging a ditch is. I know what cleaning out a barn is. That shit is hard, and I think writing can be hard. I don't think it's not hard. It's just a different kind of hard, but I get sweaty doing what I do. And it's taxing on your brain. You can't shut it off either. You can walk out of a barn, you put the shovel down and you're done. I get an idea and I can't just turn it off. 2 a.m, I'm going, oh man, wait, what if she was going to, and so it comes in fits and starts, and you've got to just embrace the thing. The best writing advice I ever read was a letter that Chekhov wrote to Gorky, who had written him, some basically how do you write? What do you do? And he wrote 3 words. He wrote write. And that was basically, he just said, you got to write. There's no other way around it. And then he went on to say something really Chekhovian and clever, that was like, if you write something bad, no one will really ever care. But if you do write something good, it could be of great importance to the theater, or something nice like that. And so Gorky probably got that and was like, son of a bitch. I thought he was going to tell me something like that I could use. But, he really did. He really told him the only thing that you can tell anybody, which is write. If you want to make a film, make a film. You want to act, you got to act. So I can't find any, it is I come from a blue collar world, and that may be why it makes sense to me, because it's work. It's like I would see my dad go off to work, and whoever else he was a hard worker. And, that instilled in me knowing how to work and being able to go and do what you need to do to get this stuff done. So it's easy to talk about, but, eventually you have to produce something. You got to have a manuscript that you can give to someone and say, hey, what do you think of this? And then you got to have tough skin and, hopefully really listen to what they say. If you don't believe them, then, you stand by what you've done. But, you do have to, most of this stuff you have to put out there for an audience, whether it's one person or 12 or 150,000, it's still, someone has to look at it and say, yeah, or no, or somewhere in between. So, but the actual writing, it's up to you. I mean, I still, wherever I've gotten to in my life, I still have stuff, all over this computer that nobody's waiting for, no one knows about. So therefore they cannot care about something they don't care, because how could they care about something they don't know exists? It's not written for some company that paid me money and is waiting, or some producer who said, hey, develop this. That's a whole different, opportunity. I still sit down and write because I like to write. So that's the driving force for me. So that probably answered nothing for you, but I hope, it was worth listening.
No, it's very interesting for me.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so on to the next question, which would be surprising because you are so nice and accommodating in our conversation, is some people call you out as a writer who's a little bit critical about humankind. What do you have against humankind?
Nothing in particular. Lots, specifically, and myself included. We're just such a weird and entertaining and terrifying bunch of people. We're capable of so much good and bad, and that's pretty fascinating. And
but you do tend to look at the bad, right?
I suppose so. Yeah, I suppose so. I think that you're constantly in drama, you're looking for conflict. Drama is conflict, so you're looking for there to be an issue. If you have a bunch of really nice people sitting together and talking about how great the weather is, you have a really boring play for the most part. Somebody's got to say something that that creates some conflict, and so I think that's part of the job for me. I can do the other, but there's so much of that being done by other people. I'm probably far more interested in the conflict, or the darker, or not even the dark, the gray zones that we live in. Why we make this choice.
Are you looking to be at odds with the audience, in conflict with the audience?
No, but I certainly don't mind the audience being in conflict with the piece that's in front of them, that it, it rouses questions in them, or an argument, or whatever. The idea that what you're doing there might have a sphere of influence that goes beyond the 2 hours that they sit with it in the theater is great. Why shouldn't it? I still, I read books that I think about afterwards, or movies I see, or listen to a song and go, oh, I love that song. It's not just the riff, or the hook of there's something about it that is interesting to me, or I don't like it, or I want to be challenged. So I think to the audience, comes at a film or a play in a very obviously a judgmental place, because they've been placed there to watch this thing and then respond. But there's a level of comfort that comes with the anonymity of sitting in the dark in a group of people and sitting in judgment of this thing. So I like to remove as much of that veil in front of them and say, hey, we're right here. We can reach out and talk to you. We can look you in the eye. That's the most exciting kind of theater for me is not 1,000 seats, but 100 seats or 10 seats. And you can look at, and that's probably why I've liked the monologue form so much, because with the monologue form, it's amazing. Maybe my favorite tool in theater is the monologue, is that being able to break the fourth wall and look at someone in the audience and say, I'm going to tell you something now that I haven't told anyone, not even my loved ones, but I'm going to tonight tell you about this, and to create a kind of discomfort that comes with being a silent partner with someone like that. That's an experience that's very hard to replicate on film. In fact, extremely hard to do. I hadn't seen the movie Equus for probably since it came out, and I'm just
based
watching
on Peter Shaffer's play, right?
Exactly, with Richard Burton. And I was just watching it again, and there's a lot of direct address that Richard Burton does in that, and I was like, even there, the power of like looking into his eyes, and it's just an image, and he's long dead, but there's something about that that's not quite the same as the other scenes when he's, and he's a very powerful performer at his best. He probably pissed away a lot of great years, as an actor and as a person, just with his own, celebrity in life and whatever. But when he was firing on all cylinders, he was a really mesmerizing person. And but that connection, and to see that kind of thing on stage, a real person is now standing there and looking me in the eye and talking to me. That's a fantastic thing that's almost doesn't have a parallel, in the arts. Rarely does that happen in dance. Does that, musicians, I guess, can make contact, with an audience like that. Singers, performers, that kind of thing. But it's a connection that's mesmerizing and fantastic.
The way that the audience sometimes changes your performance. That's also
absolutely every night. It's I did. You mentioned Bash. I did it with a version of it in Ireland with an actor playing in that Iphigenia piece, and he every night targeted a different audience member. And I say targeted because
as the drunk guy
chose them.
He was the drunk guy.
It wasn't the same seat, but whenever he sat down, because that piece is directed to one person, he would pick someone in the audience and tell them that story. And you would feel them sometimes connect to that story, and other times when they realize, oh God, he's talking to me, you could feel them like pull back and like try and look away, and he would not give up. He would just stay right on that one person and tell them that story. And it was kind of fantastic to watch, not just what he was doing, but what was happening in the audience. You could feel other people kind of shying away from if they were sitting next to that person. And it was really intriguing. Or other people would like lean forward and it's like, I'm here for you. I'm giving you my energy. And it was great. It was a cool thing. I'm very excited by the possibilities of engaging the audience beyond just, hey, we're putting on a show and up goes the curtain and we dance around for you and send you home on your way.
Great. We have a time
because I don't dance very well. Maybe that's why.
Yeah. That's why we became writers, right?
One of the many reasons.
Yeah. We deteriorated into writing.
Exactly.
So a couple of questions to wrap this fascinating, really interesting conversation. Lior is asking, do you like working with treatments and synopsis before you write, or you just go with the flow, let the characters talk? I mean, when you write something, is it different when you write a play or write a screenplay?
Not necessarily for me. If I write those things, not for me. If it's something that I'm working on my own, but if I was adapting something, that would be different. If I was working for somebody else, like you mentioned Van Helsing, we definitely had to have treatments for each of our episodes before we wrote them out, so that other people could look at those things and sign off on them. But for me, I'm not someone who writes all my bullet points down and here's a list of all the scenes that I'm going to have. Or I tend to very often just kind of it's almost like being in the woods and finding my way, along. Sometimes I see a path, sometimes I don't. I might know where I'm headed. I'm going to the other side of the woods, frankly, but how am I going to get there? I don't know. And that can lead to frustration and sometimes 50 pages of not nothing, but people just talking and nothing dramatic seems to be happening. So it's a risk, but I think at its best, it creates that I don't know where I'm going and I'm finding my way there, and that's exciting. And that, again, at its best, translates into an audience feeling that as they're watching.
Yeah, if you're surprised, the audience is surprised.
That's often the case, yeah. So I would rather, most often, if I'm afforded that opportunity, or if it's something I'm doing on my own, to take that risk and see what comes of it.
Okay, so last question. I believe Aaron would like to ask a question.
Where are you? There you are. Hello.
I'm the director of Nisan Nativ Jerusalem, who is a part of the organizers of this amazing triangles.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice. It's very inspiring and interesting. It's an amazing opportunity to meet you. I mean, we saw your movies, and it's an amazing. I want to thank everyone that collaborated to do this, including Nir and Brachi from our school, and Shuki, who is hosting, and everyone that is in it. And I want to ask you something. There is a very interesting combination in you that I see that is haunting me a little bit. On one hand, you're a craftsman. I mean, and it's amazing to hear you. I mean, you say, for me, and I know about me, rewriting is agonizing. It's very pain. I mean, I can think of many other jobs that will be easier.
Sure. And I take nothing away from that.
And you're saying, I mean, that's my craft and I'll have to do it and I embrace it, even though it's hard. I mean, you're a craftsman and you're saying I'm coming from a blue collar family and I know what hard work is, and I'm willing to do it. On the other hand, and from that point, I mean, it's like you sound a little bit like someone who just came to do the job, but you're amazingly not. I mean, when I see what you're doing, you're putting your fingers on very painful parts of humanity, and about storytelling. I mean, if I take Nurse Betty and what you say about the relationship between people, their lives, and the stories that they are hooked on, and you're saying something that actually is against our media, against media at all. Saying, okay, media is something that is in between and it takes you away from life. Just like in a woman who will dress her man and he will have to change himself to fit to her. I mean, you're saying something that is contradicting, that is really undermining in a way what we are doing here. And it's interesting for me to hear from you, what do you think about what we do here, what we do about art? Except for the fact that we want to do it and we have to do it and we suffer to do it and we make money from doing it and everything. What about us? What about people? What about humanity?
Well, what about us specifically, though? What are you saying in terms of when you say us? What about us?
People. Where are we going, and what art should be there?
You know, I'm so open to the impulse and to the process and to what people are you know, want to embrace. And so many people embrace. I see so many things that I watch, and I even like, that I have no interest in making myself. You know, I'm not like, oh, I wish I could have made that movie. Occasionally you see a movie, you go, yeah, I wish I'd made that. That's great. But a lot of times, you know, I'll watch something and have no drive to want to emulate that thing. But the feeling of just going to a theater and the lights going down and being taken away to another story, or to somebody else's life rather than your own. That's pretty elemental, you know. And I think that's why, you know, when I hear people say, "Oh, theater is, you know, dying," and I'm like, it's never going to die. It's never. People will never stop telling each other stories. There's just something too powerful about it. Too much. It's too much of a narcotic, and it's too important, I think, to us to be able to escape into those things and have those running concurrently to our own life. A book that I come home and read, just a chapter a night, because for an hour, it takes me away to this other life that is either better or worse or the same as mine, and I can embrace all of those. And it's, you know, and it kind of works in the same way. What's so great about, like, Agatha Christie? I mean, she is, you know, the best-selling author of all time. If we're going to single God out, then we're going to have to say the best-selling author of all time, including Shakespeare, Agatha Christie. And why? Because the little clever thing she realized about mysteries is that we like it both ways. When she tricks us, we like it, and when we figure her out, we like it. It's just a win-win thing. We like to go into that story and try and figure it out, and if we do, we're happy, and if we don't, we're happy. And part of it is just that we're happy when we're immersed in a story, somebody else's story. The same reason we like gossip, the same reason we, you know, pick up the newspaper to read the news. It's like, well, we are made in some way that we are interested in ourselves, the world, other people. Sometimes we hate all those things. Sometimes we love them. It's usually a mix. But I think that we all have this drive. I mean, we found with Twitter and TikTok and whatever else the fuck is out there, how unbelievably narcissistic the world is. How I had no idea that people had such a need to be seen and to, you know, have a fucking picture of themselves in front of a coffee shop. That, you know, that's how badly we needed to say, I'm here, you know. And I would have, you know, given people more hugs if I'd known that along the way. Because it's really what people, I guess, you know, not that they needed hugs, they needed recognition of the self in some way. And I think that we recognize ourselves in other stories, or we feel like, oh God, at least whatever my life is, it's not that, or it's better than that, or it's whatever it is. But there is something in the, you know, the human animal that has a need to be able to say, look at me and look at this. So I think that, you know, that's part of what fascinates me, and I'll continue to write about it. And wow, that you look at the energy you worked up in me here in the last couple of seconds. But it's such a, you know, people are just so fucking fascinating, is what it is in the end. And I'll never stop, you know, watching them and wanting to write about them. And so that's the marriage that I've made as a writer. You know,
So is writing movies your way to give people a hug?
Yeah, well, they're not very big. They're not very warm hugs, you know, I must say. But it is a way of, you know, it's a way of connecting, of you know, of telling a story. I think theater is more of a hug, really, because at least, you know, everybody there is in the moment, is present. No matter how you feel about it, you have at least had this experience, you know, between you and the artists who are all there and in the moment. So that's, you know, probably the biggest hug is the theater for me.
Okay, great. I mean, that was such an eye-opening, fascinating, generous conversation.
Oh, thanks.
And I find it surprising in a way that you ended with the note that people are fucking fascinating. I dare someone to call you a misanthrope now.
You won't have to wait too long, but yeah, it happens.
So Neil, it was a pleasure having you over.
May I, before you guys disconnect, I had a question there that I asked. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
I saw that you worked with quite a few of my friends. I used to work in Hollywood as well for, around 14 years. I was wondering, what was your experience working with Danny Dimbord and those whole, you know, new image? Well, Danny's not with them anymore, but with Davidson and all those.
With new image.
On Wickerman? I saw that you worked with them.
Yes.
Avi Lerner and all those guys.
Yeah, that was a strange mix of, you know, that was with Warner Brothers and then with Millennium New Image. Yeah, that was a lot of cooks in that particular situation. A lot of people wanting to make a different kind of movie, and so that was a tough experience, actually. But it was.
I'm sorry to hear.
Say it again.
I'm sorry to hear that it was a tough experience.
Well, you know what, you learn as much from the things that don't necessarily come out the way you started and wanting them to, as you do from the things that turn out great. You know, I learned a lot about shooting on that particular movie, and so it's everything's a good experience in terms of learning. But not everything is as, you know, what comes out as well as you want it to. But it's part of the job, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was also a question that how to deal with rejection and failure, and I think you answered it perfectly.
You just keep going. You know what? If somebody says no, you just bounce and you go in the other direction. You go until you hear yes, basically.
I was wondering because it seems like it would be an interesting group to work with, as my experience. So
interesting in quotes, yeah.
Yeah, that was the. I worked with them on a film with Nicolas Cage as well, so it was
I think they did a couple, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're definitely you know, Nicolas Cage is there on the V list, but
they like people, yeah, that have name recognition, definitely. Yeah,
no, it's. I've read so many people would give to me projects. They say, okay, this actor is attached and that actor is attached, and they just to get it to hand over to New Image. But when I lived in LA before Jerusalem, but I would love to somehow. I actually am developing a project that I would love to talk to you about.
Wait, Efrat, I'm so sorry to break in. I just, you know, we do, unfortunately, we're almost 8 minutes over. So I think, you know, maybe if you want to try and reach out to Neil on the side, but I think we have to wrap up.
How do we do that?
Why don't you write us an email and we can try and put you in touch. But thank you so much. Have a good evening.
How do you,
Neil, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all. Thanks. Good luck with everything you're doing. And I know it's a crazy time, but it's always a crazy time. So
it's crazy across the board.
When this passes, something else will come along, and you either keep going or you don't. You know, the best advice I probably ever given anybody is to replace the word if with the word when. You know, don't think about if this happens for me, it's when it's going to happen for me, and attack it from that point of view. So good luck, and keep making good stuff.
Thanks a lot, and you too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hi, hello. I want to say thank you again to Shuki, and also invite you all to next week session. We're gonna meet. We're gonna have a creators roundtable. Actually, I think we can move back into Hebrew since we are בירושלים ואפשר לדבר.
נכון, השפה הזאת, כן.
נכון. אז אני רוצה להזמין אתכם לשבוע הבא, שבה אנחנו בעצם ממשיכים את המפגשים וסביב כתיבה ובימוי ויצירה, כשניפגש עם שוקי בעצם שוב, נפגש לנו שוב ביחד עם מיטל רז, אחת מהיוצרים של מייקל, שסיים עכשיו 15 שנה של טירוף בימתי וטלוויזיוני מסתבר, עם לירון בן שלוש, השחקנית והכותבת של עתי לילה, ועם הדר גלרון, שבעצם נעשה מפגש ונמשיך לדבר בעצם על נושאים שעלו בשיחה הזו.
כן, הזדמנות מעולה לדבר על תיאטרון, קולנוע, טלוויזיה, מכל הזוויות. אז אתם מוזמנים בשבוע הבא. תודה רבה.
תודה.